Hi and welcome to Tristan channel, and in this video I'll be doing another video in my series of Masters of the Mystic Arts. In the last one I did John Dee. In this one I'll be going over King Solomon, who wrote the Keys of Solomon and a Clavicle of Solomon and various other titles. There's so much on his life, but I'll cover as much as I can in this video. Solomon, also called Jedediah, was, according to the Hebrew Bible and Christian Old Testament, a fabulously wealthy and wise monarch of the United Kingdom of Israel, who succeeded his father King David. According to the Talmud, Solomon is one of the 48 Jewish prophets. In the Quran, he is considered to be a major Islamic prophet, and Muslims generally refer to him as Sulaiman ibn Dawood. Sorry, I butchered that. The Hebrew Bible identifies Solomon as the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem, beginning in the 4th year of his reign, using the vast wealth he and his father had accumulated. He dedicated the temple to Yahweh, the God of Israel. Solomon is portrayed as great in wisdom, wealth, and power, and beyond either of the previous kings of the country. He is a subject of many other later references excuse me, and legends, most notably in the 1st century apocryphal work known as the Testament of Solomon. In the New Testament, he is portrayed as a teacher of wisdom, excelled by Jesus, and as arrayed in glory, but excelled by the lilies of the field. In later years, in mostly non-biblical circles, Solomon also came to be known as a magician and an exorcist, with numerous amulets and medallion seals dating from the Hellenistic period invoking his name. The conventional dates of Solomon's reign are derived from biblical chronologically, excuse me, and are set from about 970 to 931 BCE. Regarding the Davidic dynasty to which King Solomon belongs, its chronology can be checked against datable Babylonian and Assyrian records at a few points, and these correspondence have allowed archaeologists to date its kings in a modern framework. According to most widely used chronology, based on that by the Old Testament, Professor Edwin R. Fethel, the death of Solomon and the division of his kingdom would have occurred in the fall of 931 BCE. Solomon was born in Jerusalem, the second-born child of David and his wife Bathsheba, widow of Uriah the Hittite. The first child, a son conceived adulterously during Uriah's lifetime, had died during the birth. It is believed by some that this was a judgment of God. Solomon had 3 named full brothers born to Bathsheba: Nathan, Shammua, and Shobab, besides 6 known older half-brothers born as of many mothers. A biblical narrative shows that Solomon served as a peace offering between God and David due to his adulterous relationship with Bathsheba. In an effort to hide this sin, for example, he sent the woman's husband to battle in the subsequently realized hope that he would be killed there. After he died, David was finally able to marry his wife. As punishment, the first child who was conceived during the adulterous relationship died. Solomon was born after David was forgiven. It is this reason why his name, which means peace, was chosen. Some historians cited that Nathan the prophet brought up Solomon as his father was busy governing the realm. This could also be attributed to the notion that the prophet held great influence over David because he knew of his adultery, which was considered a grievous offence under the Mosaic law. According to the first book of Kings, when David was old, he could not get warm. So they sought a beautiful young woman throughout all of the territory of Israel and found Abishag the Shumite and brought her to the king. The young woman was very beautiful, and she was of service to the king and attended to him, but the king knew her not. While David was in this state court, factions were maneuvering for power. David's heir apparent, Adonijah, acted to have himself declared king, but was outmaneuvered by Bathsheba and the prophet Nathan, who convinced David to proclaim Solomon king, according to his earlier promise, despite Solomon being younger than his brothers. Solomon, as instructed by David, began his reign with an intensive purge, including his father's chief general Joab, among others, and further consolidated his position by appointing friends throughout the administration, including in religious positions as well as in civic and military posts. It is said that Solomon ascended to the throne when he was only about 15. Solomon greatly expanded his military strength, especially the cavalry and chariot arms. He founded numerous colonies, some of which doubled as trading posts and military outposts. Trade relationships were the focus of his administration. In particular, he continued his father's very profitable relationship with the Phoenician king Hiram I of Tyre. They sent out joint expeditions to the lands of Tarshish and Ophir to engage in the trade of luxury products, importing gold, silver, and sandalwood, pearls, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Solomon is considered the most wealthy of the Israelite kings named in the Bible. He was also famous for three things: his wisdom, wealth, and construction. Solomon was the biblical king most famous for his wisdom. In Kings 1, he sacrificed to God, and God later appeared to him in a dream, asking what Solomon wanted from God. Solomon asked for wisdom in order to be a better ruler and guide his people. Pleased, God personally answered Solomon's prayer, promising him great wisdom because he did not ask for self-serving rewards like long life or the death of his enemies. Perhaps the best known story of his wisdom is the Judgment of Solomon, a story most of my generation in particular would have at least heard of from school, at least in RE, or or saying all that effect. But it is the story of when two women who each laid claim to being the mother of the same child. Solomon easily resolved this dispute by commanding the child to be cut in half and shared between the two women. One woman promptly renounced her claim, proving that she would rather give the child up than see it killed. Solomon then declared that the woman who showed compassion to be the true mother, entitled her to the whole child. Solomon was traditionally considered the author of several biblical books, including not only the collections of Proverbs, but also of Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon, and later the apocryphal book, the Wisdom of Solomon. As for his wealth, according to the Hebrew Bible, the Israelite monarchy gained its highest splendor and wealth during Solomon's reign of 40 years. In a single year, according to Kings 1, chapter 10, verse 14, Solomon collected tribute amounting to 666 talents, which is 18,125 kilograms of gold. Solomon is described as surrounding himself with all the luxuries and grandeur of an Eastern monarch, and his government prospered. He entered into alliance with Hiram the first, king of Tyre, who in many ways greatly assisted him in his numerous undertakings. For some years before his death, David was engaged in collecting materials for building a temple in Jerusalem as a permanent home for Yahweh and the Ark of the Covenant. Solomon is described as undertaking the construction of the temple, which, with the help of an architect also named Hiram, and other materials sent from King Hiram of Tyre. After the completion of the temple, Solomon is described in the biblical narrative as erecting many other buildings of importance in Jerusalem. For 13 years, he was engaged in the building of a royal palace on the Opal, a hilly point in central Jerusalem. This complex includes buildings referred to as the house or hall of the Forest of Lebanon, the hall or porch of pillars, the hall of the throne or the hall of justice, as well as his own residence, and a residence for his wife, Pharaoh's daughter. Solomon's throne is said to have been spectacularly opulent and possessed moving parts, making it one of the earliest mechanical devices in history. Solomon also constructed great waterworks for the city and the Milo for the defense of the city. However, excavations of Jerusalem have discovered no monumental architecture from the era and no remains of either the temple or Solomon's palace have been found. Solomon is also described as rebuilding cities elsewhere in Israel, creating the port of Ezion Geber and reconstructing Palmyra in the wilderness as the commercial depot and military outpost. Although the location of the port of Ezion Geber is known, no remains have ever been found. More archaeological success has been achieved with the major cities Solomon is said to have strengthened or rebuilt. For example, Hazor Megiddo and Giza. These all have substantial ancient remains, including impressive six-chambered gates and Hashla palaces. However, it is no longer the scholarly consensus that these structures date to the time, according to the Bible, when Solomon ruled. According to the Bible, during Solomon's reign, Israel enjoyed great commercial prosperity. with extensive traffic being carried on by the land with Tyre, Egypt, and Arabia, and by sea with Tarshish, Opera, and South India. The historical accuracy of his life is still a hot debate amongst historians and biblical scholars. The legends of Solomon are well known, such as in the story of collection of 1001 Nights describes a genie or jinn who had displeased King Solomon and was punished by being locked in a bottle and thrown into the sea. Since the bottle was sealed with Solomon's seal, the genie was helpless to free himself until he was freed many centuries later by a fisherman who had discovered the bottle. In other stories from the 1001 Nights, protagonists who had to leave their homeland and to travel the unknown places of the world saw signs which proved that Solomon had already been there. Sometimes protagonists discovered words of Solomon that were intended to help those who were lost and had unluckily reached those forbidden and deserted places. According to the rabbinical literature, on account of his modest request for wisdom only, Solomon was rewarded with riches and an unprecedented glorious realm which extended over the upper world inhabited by the angels and over the world of the terrestrial globe with all its inhabitants, including all the beasts, fowl, and reptiles, as well as the demons and spirits. His control over the demons, spirits, and animals augmented his splendor. The demons bringing him precious stones, besides water from distant countries, to irrigate his exotic plants. The beasts and the fowl, and of their own accord, entered the kitchen of Solomon's palace, so that they might be used as food for him, and extravagant meals for him were prepared daily by each of his 700 wives and his 300 concubines, with the thought that perhaps the king would feast that day in her house. A magic ring called the Seal of Solomon was supposedly given to Solomon and gave him power over demons or jinn. The magical symbol said to have been on the Seal of Solomon, which made it efficacious, is often considered to be the Star of David, though this emblem, also known as the Shield of David, is known to have been associated with Judaism only as recently as the 11th century CE, while the five-pointed star, or the pentagram, can be found on jars and other artifacts from Jerusalem dated back to at least the 2nd and 4th centuries BCE, and is more likely to have been the emblem found on the ring purportedly used by King Solomon to control the jinn or demons. Asmodeus, king of demons, was one day, according to the classical rabbis, captured by Benaiah using the ring and was forced to remain in Solomon's service. In one tale, Asmodeus brought a man with two heads from under the earth to show Solomon. The man, unable to return, married a woman from Jerusalem and then had 7 sons, 6 of whom resembled the mother, while one resembled the father in having 2 heads. After their father's death, the son with the 2 heads claimed 2 shares of the inheritance, arguing that he was 2 men. Solomon decided that the son with two heads was only one man. The Seal of Solomon, in some legends known as the Ring of Adanleb, was a highly sought-after symbol of power. In several legends, different groups or individuals attempted to steal it or attain it in some manner. One legend concerning Asmodeus goes on to state that Solomon one day asked Asmodeus what could make demons powerful over man, and Asmodeus asked to be freed and given the ring so that he could demonstrate. Solomon agreed, but Asmodeus threw the ring into the sea and it was swallowed by a fish. Asmodeus then swallowed the king, stood up fully with one wing touching heaven and the other the earth, and spat out Solomon to a distance of 400 miles. The rabbis claim this was a divine punishment for Solomon's having failed to follow 3 divine commands, and Solomon was forced to wander from city to city until he eventually arrived in an Ammonite city where he was forced to work in the king's kitchens. Solomon gained a chance to prepare a meal for the Ammonite king, which the king found so impressive that the previous cook was sacked and Solomon put in his place. The king's daughter Namar subsequently fell in love with Solomon, but the family, thinking Solomon a commoner, disapproved. So the king decided to kill them both by sending them into the desert. Solomon and the king's daughter wandered the desert until they reached a coastal city where they bought a fish to eat, which just happened to be the one that had swallowed the magic ring. Solomon was then able to regain his throne and expel Asmodeus. The element of a ring thrown into the sea and found back in the fish's belly also appeared in Herodotus' account of Polycrates, the tyrant of Samos. In another familiar version of the legend of the Seal of Solomon, Asmodeus disguises himself. In some myths, he's disguised as King Solomon himself, while in the more frequently heard versions, he's disguised as a falcon, calling himself Gavin, one of the King Solomon's trusted friends. The concealed Asmodeus tells travellers who had ventured up to the King Solomon's grand lofty palace that the seal of Solomon was thrown into the sea. He then convinces them to plunge in and attempt to retrieve it, for if they do, they would take the throne as king. Other magical items attributed to Solomon are his key and his table. The latter was said to be held in Toledo, Spain, during Visigoth rule and was part of the loot taken by Tariq ibn Zayed during the Umayyad conquest of Libya. According to Ibn Abd-al-Hakam, History of the Conquest of Spain, the former appears in the title of the Lesser Key of Solomon, a grimoire whose framing story is Solomon capturing demons using his ring and forcing them to explain themselves to him. In the Book of Deadly Names, purportedly translated from Arabic, manuscripts found hidden in a building in Spain, the king of the jinn, Fiquitish, brings 72 jinn before King Solomon to confess their corruptions and places of residence. Fitiquish tells King Solomon the recipes for curing such corruptions as each evil jinn confesses. Also, according to legend, angels also helped Solomon in building the temple, though not by choice. The edifice, according to rabbinical legend, miraculously constructed throughout the large heavy stones rising and settling in their respective places of themselves. Pardon me. The general opinion of the rabbis is that Solomon hewed the stones by means of a shamir, a mythical worm whose mere touch cleft rocks. According to Midrash Talihim, the shamir was brought from paradise by Solomon's eagle, but most of the rabbis state that Solomon was informed of the worm's haunts by Asmodeus. The shamir had been entrusted by the prince of the sea to the mountain rooster alone, and the rooster had sworn to guard it well. But Solomon's men found the bird's nest and covered it with glass. When the bird returned, it used the shamir to break the glass. Whereupon the men scared the bird, causing it to drop the worm, which then the men could then bring to Solomon. Early adherents of the Kabbalah portray Solomon as having sailed through the air on a throne of light placed on an eagle, which brought him near the heavenly gates, as well as to the dark mountains behind which the fallen angels Uzzah and Azazel were chained. The eagle would rest on the chains, and Solomon using the magic ring would compel the two angels to reveal every mystery he desired to know. According to one legend, while traveling magically, Solomon noticed a magnificent palace to which there appeared to be no entrance. He ordered the demons to climb to the roof and see if they could discover any living being within the building. But they found only an eagle which said that it was 700 years old, but it had never seen an entrance. An elder brother of the eagle, 900 years old, was then found, but it also did not know the entrance. Sorry, legs going dead. The eldest brother of these two birds, which was 1,300 years old, then declared it had been informed by its father that the door was on the west side, but that it had become hidden by sand drifted by the wind. Having discovered the entrance, Solomon found an idol inside that had its mouth a silver tablet saying in Greek, a language not thought by modern scholars to have existed 1,000 years before the time of Solomon, that the statue was of Shaddad and the son of Ad, and it had reigned over 1,000,000 cities, rode on 1,000,000 horses, had under it 1,000,000 vassals, and slew 1,000,000 warriors. Yet it could not resist the angel of death. In Freemasonry, Masonic rituals refer to King Solomon and the building of his temple. Masonic temples were a Masonic lodge, where Masonic lodge meetings are held, are allegorical references to the King Solomon's temple. And there you go, a video, or as much as I could cover, on King Solomon. I hope you found this video insightful and fascinating, as so did I making it. So if you like this video, hit the like, and if you're new to the channel, then please subscribe, because it'd be great to have you here. So until the next video, take care and be well.